What's up guys, my name is Sean, I work on Soda Dungeon, and today I have another video update for you. So for this video I wanted to cover something I've touched on before but never explained fully, which is why is Soda Dungeon 2 taking this long to make? Stick around to the end of the video though, and I promise I will have some good news. So there's a quick psychological answer, which is just that this development cycle kind of lacks context because there was never a wait for Soda Dungeon 1. We just kind of created it as a brand new game and released it, and nobody knew about it, so there was nothing to wait for. That being said, the full development cycle for Soda Dungeon 1 was about a year, maybe less, and the first official work for Soda Dungeon 2 began in July of 2016. I don't think we really talked about the game or mentioned it until early 2017, and we're already in 2018, so what gives? First off, it was a slow transition in focus from Soda Dungeon 1 to 2. Even after starting Part 2, we still tackled localization, the Halloween update, and other small stuff for the original game. And right now we're much more focused on Part 2, but 1 still takes up part of our daily schedule. Sometimes we have to do tiny bug fixes, make some new promo material, help users with a missing save file, not to mention social media. So anything involving YouTube, Twitter, Discord, Reddit, it's all something we have to spend time on while still working on Soda Dungeon 2. But most of the factors do involve the game itself. And for example, a big one is the artwork. So not many people know this, but about half the enemy sprites for Soda Dungeon 1 were from another game that didn't pan out at all. Right from the get-go, we already had an entire collection of enemies ready to use. But also we increased the base resolution for Soda Dungeon 2, about 1.5 times. Resolution isn't usually discussed because we always scale up the output to be full screen for whatever target device you're playing the game on. Or if you play on Steam, you can size the window to whatever you want. But it means that since we're increasing the base resolution, it means that base image itself has more pixels, so it needs upscaled less, meaning that the final result actually contains more detail, or sort of like a high definition sprite if you want to look at it that way, or at least higher definition than the previous game. So I wanted to show a little comparison here. Here's sort of a side-by-side with Soda Dungeon 1 and Soda Dungeon 2. So this is going to be a little bit wonky because we're talking about native resolution, but I'm recording this to my computer, and that is getting downscaled and then being rebroadcast to you on YouTube, which then you can set to whatever resolution you want. So it's getting lost in translation, but all that's important is that these two images are relative to one another. So the image on the left is Soda Dungeon 1, as it sort of, like I said, natively appears in the game. And the image on the right is the same, basically the same in comparison amount of pixels for its native image. And so you can just tell from a quick glance that there's a lot more, we have a lot more room to fit detail into the image. The tavern is just packed with more items in the background. The character sprites are more detailed. Like the little gold symbol down here is much clearer, easier to read. You can really tell if you kind of zoom in on the Soda Junkie here. So here's the original Soda Junkie. Nothing to complain about. But if you move over to the new one, you can see there's just a lot more detail in the character itself. Like you can actually see the full face and the body, and it looks like a much more fleshed out game character. So we're really just trying to maximize the screen space a bit more effectively. Also though is the animation. So, and let me switch over to this picture. So not only is each sprite larger and more detailed, but most of them contain more animation frames as well. So up here you can see the original rat from Soda Dungeon 1. It's a very small, sort of plain looking sprite, and its animation is very simple. Basically its head bobs up and down in each frame, and I think its tail kind of moves a little bit, But down here we have the rat from Soda Dungeon 2, and you can just tell immediately that the sprite is much larger, it's more detailed, it's more colorful. The mouth actually opens as it animates, the tail kind of curls up and uncurls. If you can imagine putting that kind of detail into every character in the game, then sort of showing part of the reason why this game is taking longer to produce. So artwork aside, what about me in the programming department? Well, we moved to a new game engine. Soda Dungeon 1 was created in a framework called OpenFL, and Soda Dungeon 2 is being created in Unity. OpenFL was great for us, but it was sort of a shaky open source project backed by a very talented but small community. I didn't really think it was the best choice moving forward, and it's a bit more complicated than that, but it's not really worth getting into for this video. The main point being just that OpenFL and Unity are very different. Namely the fact that Unity is a 3D engine with 2D tools built into it, where OpenFL was just a flat-out 2D framework. So it's good to have Soda Dungeon 1 as a reference point for some of the game logic, but almost every other feature in the game that you're used to has been built from the ground up completely in Unity. And you know, they have very, very different methods of basically displaying sprites on the screen. And as I rebuild each feature from Soda Dungeon 1, it's easier to spot what needs work and what needs improving. And now that I have a better idea of what kind of content we're going to want to add to the game, which is great and should make the game easier to expand, but it requires putting more work in on the front end of things so that the game is ready to be expanded properly. At least I hope so. There are definitely plenty of code snippets I found and looked at and thought, like, why did I ever do this way? And so, you know, definitely trying to clean those up and do it right this time. Lastly, we're aiming to launch Soda Dungeon 2 with at least the same features as Soda Dungeon 1. So things like our save file transfer, localization support, and other things were added into Soda Dungeon 1 post-release. And now that players are used to those features, we would like Soda Dungeon 2 to ship with those out of the box. And so that just, you know, that also delays production time because it's, again, just things that never had to be produced before the release of the original game. Now we have to take into account. So for many of you, I'm assuming this video is either very interesting, maybe very frustrating, or some mix of the two. But at the beginning, I did promise good news if you stuck it out to the end, so here we go. First, Soda Dungeon 2 is mostly feature complete, and by that, I mean all the main systems that dictate how the game functions. The dungeon itself, loading and animating enemies, player characters, collecting and storing items, building structures for the town, managing your party, crafting, displaying dialogue, just the menu system, so on and so forth. All those kinds of just things you take for granted that a game needs. It also includes more technical things like serializing the save file, transferring the save file, like I said, a lot of the menu system, leaderboards, localization, etc. So what we're lacking right now is a lot of content and game structure. So while all the systems are in place, they need actual enemy sprites, stats, attacks, item data, written dialogue, all the things that make a game, I guess. So the skeleton is there, it just needs a lot of filling in. The other good news is that we are currently planning a private alpha for Soda Dungeon on Steam before the end of the year. We have an actual date in mind, but we're not going to commit to that just yet. And I know the end of the year is still pretty far away, but we just want to make sure we have time to get what we need into the game first. I do not yet know what the sign-up process will be. We have to think about that. I don't know how many people we will limit it to and how we will go about giving access to the game, but we will get that figured out. And it's possible that the alpha will extend to mobile, but honestly, it's just way easier to manage builds on Steam, so it's all we can guarantee at the moment. Alright guys, I know this video was a little longer than usual, at least it felt that way, I could be wrong. Personally, I'm very excited because the game is now actually starting to take shape. Before, kind of like I said, it was just sort of an interconnected set of systems that sort of talk to each other but not really, and now it actually feels like a game you can load up and start and, you know, progress through. So a lot of work to do, but it's getting there, and I think we're getting over that hump of initial work that needs to be done to even have something to show. Even just a couple months ago, it felt more like a working prototype as opposed to an actual game. As always, for the latest updates, you can follow us on Twitter, you can check out our subreddit, or you can follow me here right on YouTube for updates that way. Those links will be below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.